guys, I'm sure you miss me. This week's article of the week I'm going to do with you on video for the rest of the year, so it's exciting. Make sure that you have a copy of the article. This week also, you need this thing printed with it. Okay, those are both on Google Classroom. Okay, but you need both things printed. Okay, so have those, a highlighter and a pen before we start. I'm going to start by looking at this other sheet. It's called Reading Fix-Up Strategies. That's the literacy skill for this week. So we're going to talk about these things. These are things that you can do when you don't understand what you're reading. Okay, so you already do some of these things. Everybody does. And then there's things that you don't do. So we're going to talk through them real quick so that you know what they mean. So reading fix-up strategies, things any reader can do when comprehension breaks down. First is reread what you just read. Don't just keep reading. Okay, that's probably the most obvious. That's the one that most people do. Okay, the next is read out loud. This is one I definitely use. It says slow down or mouth, whisper, or speak out loud. I know I've talked to you guys about this in terms of testing, but if I'm reading something that I don't really understand, it helps me to slow down. And if I'm around a bunch of people and I don't want to look dumb, then I just kind of mouth the words to myself. But if I'm alone, I'll fully speak the words out loud. There's something about that, about hearing the words, that can help you understand what you're reading. Next is context clues. This is specifically for words that you don't understand. Look for a synonym, antonym, example, or a definition. Slow down. Don't rush it. Understanding takes time. Okay, so obviously if you don't understand a paragraph and you just read it really quickly, you're not going to understand. You're going to need to slow down. Try it again. Make connections. Think about things that you already know. What can you connect to it to kind of help build the context? Break it down. Okay, this is like our other literacy skill, monitor comprehension. Okay, can you break down what this one paragraph meant, and then the next paragraph, and then the next paragraph, and then put them all together? If you can't understand the whole paragraph, can you understand it sentence by sentence? Okay, so putting it in manageable chunks so that you're not reading a whole article and you're like, it was about plastic. Okay, but what was each paragraph about? Use text features. That's something that's going to come up in this article, and also came up in our monitor comprehension article. Things like graphics and subtitles and captions. They're all there to help you understand. Author's purpose, thinking about what the author is trying to communicate to you. Are they trying to persuade you? Are they trying to entertain you? What's going on there? Pay attention to your thoughts. That's why we do annotating, so that you can notice the things that you're thinking to help you make more connections, okay, and try to understand things. And then piece it together, putting all of these things together to help you add meaning to the whole article. So I want you to go through here, okay, and highlight at least one, hopefully two things that you know you already do, okay? So for me, I'm going to highlight read out loud, okay? I know I do that one. And I'm also going to do break it down, because I know that if I have a hard time understanding something, I'll break it down into chunks and then put them together. Okay, so I've highlighted the two things that I know that I already do as reading fix-up strategies. The next thing I want you to do is to pick one to try with this article. Okay, you can pick any of the ones that you don't already do. I'm going to say use text features just because I know there are text features in this article. You could choose that one. You could choose another one. That's totally fine. Just think about one that you think would help you and that maybe you want to work on, especially in preparing for the SOL. Okay, so I've circled the one that I want to work on this week. This is getting turned in with my annotated article. Okay, so then we can move on to the article. I'm going to be thinking about those reading fix-up strategies, and even at the top of the article, I'm going to write the one that I'm trying this week. So I wrote use text features. Okay, I've written that right at the top so that when I turn it into myself, I can see which one I was using. Okay, so our article this week is called Black Men Sentenced to More Time for Committing the Exact Same Crime as a white person, study finds. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is that reading fix-up strategy of making connections. Okay, and think about, what do I already know about this topic before I start reading? Okay, so it's saying black men are sentenced to more time for committing the exact same crime as a white person. So I'm going to think about maybe my opinion. Is that something that I think is true and something that I've already spent time thinking about? Is that something that is hard for me to accept as a fact? It says that a study found that this was true. So this is not an opinion article. Okay. So that means the author's purpose is to inform us. It's not to persuade us. It's not an opinion. So it's saying that this is a fact. And so I'm going to think about kind of what things I've heard about in the news or with people I know about people spending more time in prison if they are a person of color or if they're white. So this article is from November 2017, so it's a little bit old, but still relevant. Okay. Black men who commit the same crimes as white men receive federal prison sentences that are on average nearly 20% longer, according to a new report on sentencing disparities from the United States Sentencing Commission. I'm going to highlight nearly 20% longer and federal prison sentences, because I think those are the two main ideas there. That this is talking about federal prison and an exact number, 20% longer. Okay, so if my white friend was sentenced to 10 years in prison for one crime, then my black friend would be sentenced for 12 years for the exact same crime. Okay, now you might not know what the word disparities means, so I would circle it. If you don't know what disparities means, circle it. Okay. You can use context clues to come back to this later to help you understand it. These disparities were observed after controlling for a wide variety of sentencing factors. So I'm going to highlight controlling for a wide variety of sentencing factors. And I'm just going to make an annotation here because my guess is that some of those sentencing factors are like a criminal record or like age or, a judge's bias. And I'm just guessing here, but those are some of the thoughts I'm having, so I want to make sure that I'm writing those down so that when you turn your article into me, I can see what you were thinking as you were reading. Okay? And then it says, including age, education, citizenship, weapon possession, and prior criminal history. Okay, so I guessed most of them. I didn't guess education or citizenship or weapon possession. Okay, so I just kind of underlined those. Okay, and then here we've got our first text feature. Okay, it's a graph. So, same crimes, different times. Percentage difference in sentence length for black men versus white men with similar backgrounds who commit the same crimes by time period. Okay, so that is kind of a long explanation of what this graph is about. But this is going to help us it gives us a visual of what the article is talking about. Okay, so down at the bottom you have the years. So it says 1998 to 2003, 2003 to 2004, 05 to 07, 07 to 11, 11 to 16. So it's the percentage difference in sentence length for black men versus white men. Okay, so that means in 1998 to 2003, that 5-year period, there was an average of 11% longer. So that would mean basically if one person was sentenced to 10 years, the black person would be sentenced for 11 years-ish. Okay, it went down in 2003 to 2004. So I would probably circle that and just ask why. Why did it go down in that year specifically? Okay, then it starts going back up. It hits a higher point. Can't go backwards on this video. Sorry, I'm not coordinated. From 07 to 11. Okay, and then just slightly back down again for 2011 to 2016. So my question here is why does it change year to year? And I also wonder how they got these numbers. Okay. If I have an idea about those questions, I can also write that down. Like maybe I think it's because of this or that, you know. You might have more background knowledge on this topic than I do. Good for you. Okay, then we're going to keep going with the article just underneath the graph here. The black-white sentencing disparities have been increasing in recent years, the report found, particularly following the Supreme Court's decision in United States versus Booker in 2005. I'm going to highlight that because that is, if I'm using that text feature of the graph, I see that 2005 is when that number jumped from 5.5 to 15.2. So that tells me that United States versus Booker is going to be important. Booker gave federal judges significantly more discretion. If you don't know what discretion means, circle it. Gave judges significantly more discretion on sentencing by making it easier to impose harsher or more lenient sentences than the USSC's sentencing guidelines called for. Okay, this is a pretty meaty sentence, so I'm going to use the fix-up strategy of rereading to make sure that I'm understanding the full sentence. So it says, United States versus Booker in 2005 gave federal judges more discretion on sentencing by making it easier to impose harsher or more lenient sentences than the USSC's sentencing guidelines called for. So I highlighted making it easier to impose harsher or more lenient sentences because that's the meat of what it's saying. So a judge can choose whether they want to have a harsh sentence or a lenient sentence, other than what the sentencing guidelines called for. Okay, so I highlighted that part because it's the main idea of the sentence, so it kind of pops out to me, that shows me that they were giving judges more power instead of having to follow a guideline that the sentencing commission told them to. That sounds unfair to me, and I'm writing that down. That's one of my annotations. Okay. Before that decision, federal judges were generally required to abide by those sentencing guidelines. So before United States versus Booker, judges had to follow the guidelines. After United States versus Booker, they were given more freedom to choose on how they sentenced people. Okay, so I've kind of gone over this idea now a couple times using that fix-up strategy of rereading, slowing down, breaking it down, connecting it to the text features. I'm using so many strategies here to help me understand that. According to the Sentencing Commission's report, the black-white sentencing disparities is a word that they're using a lot here. So if that's a word that you didn't understand, I would make sure to go back and try to figure that out with the context. But it's talking about black and white sentencing disparities. So what do we know about black and white sentencing? Are they the same or are they different? We know that they're different. That's what this whole article is about. So from that, I can tell that the word disparity shows that there's something different happening. And the word disparity actually means unequal. Okay, parity, P-A-R-I-T-Y, means equal. Okay, so if you didn't know what that means, write that down on your article. So parity equals equality. Okay, so disparity, D-I-S, means a negative. So disparity means unequal. Okay, all right, so the black and white sentencing disparities are being driven in large part by non-government sponsored departures and variances. I'm not sure that I really understand what they mean by that, so I'm going to circle it here or highlight it and either say like, I don't know what this means or what are they. I'm going to, when it says non-government sponsored, makes me wonder if there's something having to do with money or the fact that prisons are owned privately. That's just something that I'm making a connection to in my background knowledge. I might be wrong, but Okay, in plain English, thank you, that's nice. Sentencing choices made by judges at their own discretion, so their own choices. Judges are less likely to voluntarily, so to choose, to revise sentences downward. Okay, if you have a hard time understanding that, reread it. So to voluntarily revise, so to choose to change sentences downward. So if a sentence goes down, that means it's less time for black offenders than for white ones, in other words. So judges are less likely to choose to take a sentence down for a black person as opposed to a white person. And even when judges do reduce black offender sentences, they do so by smaller amounts than for white offenders. So there's two things going on there. They less often do they change the sentence down, and then in this fewer cases when they do actually change the sentence, they reduce it by a smaller amount than they do for white people. Okay, so there's two things going on there. That finding suggests that giving judges more discretion in sentencing, so more choice in sentencing, as the Booker decision did in 2005. So that suggests that since 2005, when judges got more power, it allows more racial bias to seep into the process. So I'm going to put a note here that says that judges can't escape bias. Okay, that when the law gives judges more power, they're more likely to be influenced by their own personal beliefs. Okay, so I just made a note about that here, that's basically what that study means. But Mark Maurer, executive director of the Sentencing Project, a group working to reduce bias in the criminal justice system, I'm just going to highlight that, reduce bias in the criminal justice system, says there's more to it than that. He says that decisions by federal prosecutors, whether to seek a charge carrying a mandatory minimum sentence, for instance, are also driving the disparities. Okay, so this is just basically saying, like, there's more to it. Okay, sorry guys, my computer went black. Still here. Okay. So there's more to it than just the racial bias. What we see is that the charging decisions of prosecutors are key. Okay, so prosecutors are the lawyers who are going like against the person who is accused of the crime. So I'm going to write here, it's not just judges, but lawyers too. He said via email. Whether done consciously or not, so whether someone's aware of it or not, prosecutors are more likely to charge African Americans with such charges than whites. Okay, so that's telling us that it's not just the judges deciding on the sentence, but a prosecutor, the person who works for the state, is choosing to recommend higher sentences or come up with harsher charges for people who are not white than people who are. Okay. A 2014 University of Michigan Law School study, for instance, found that all other factors being equal, okay, so I'm going to underline or highlight that, all other factors being equal, black offenders were 75% more likely to face a charge carrying a mandatory minimum sentence than a white offender who committed the same crime. I'm going to reread that to make sure that I really understand what it's saying. So, black offenders were 75% more likely to face a charge carrying a mandatory minimum sentence than white offender who committed the same crime. So that means prosecutors, the lawyers who are charging the person, they can decide what charge they want to bring against a person. And black offenders are more likely to be charged with a more serious crime that requires a mandatory minimum sentence than a white person if they committed the same crime. Okay? So that is up to the prosecutors on what they're choosing to charge the people with. It's possible that if a prosecutor now recognizes that a judge is not constrained by the pre-Booker guidelines, so before 2005, he or she may charge a case as a mandatory sentence to ensure that a certain amount of prison time is imposed with no possible override by the judge. Okay, so this is again the prosecutor, not the judge. The United States currently houses the world's largest prison population. I'm going to highlight that. With an incarceration rate of roughly 666 inmates per 100,000 people. Among whites, the rate is 450 inmates per 100,000 people. The incarceration for blacks is over 5 times higher, 2,306 inmates per 100,000 people. I'm going to highlight where it says the incarceration rate for blacks is over 5 times higher. Okay, because that's showing us how many more black people are in prison than white people. Which I might write down as an annotation. How many more black people are in prison than white people? The USSC, so the Sentencing Commission, report indicates that sentencing decisions are a big driver of those numbers. So the USSC report, that's what this article is about, their report, says that it's the sentencing decisions, that's why there are more black people in prison. Not because more black people commit crimes, but because of the sentencing decisions by the judges and the prosecutors. It's a big driver of those numbers. And according to the University of Michigan study, at the federal level alone, simply eliminating the sentencing disparity would reduce the number of black men in federal prison by about 9%. And save taxpayers at least $230 million a year. This is insane. Let's read it again. Okay, so if we got rid of that ability for judges to just choose how they're sentencing, or if we got rid of the way prosecutors are able to decide how they charge people, so if we made it more equal, okay, it would reduce the number of black men in federal prison by 9%. Okay, and it would save taxpayers at least $230 million a year. That's crazy. Okay, so if I wasn't quite sure what that paragraph meant, I would write down a note here to monitor comprehension. So make it equal. Prison population would go down for black men, and taxes would go down. Okay, so I just jotted that note. That's me monitoring comprehension to make sure that I understand what that paragraph meant. Okay, so there's a lot to work with in this article. Make sure that you have marked according to the reading fix-up strategy so that I can see that you're using that literacy skill, and then also using your annotation so that I can see what you're thinking as you're reading. And then remember, you need to turn in the annotated article with your article response. So your article response is typed on Google Classroom. There's not a lot of great response questions on this one. It just says pick a passage from the article and respond to it. And then there's that move made by the author thing that we don't really worry about. But so there's a lot that you can respond to in here, okay, when you pick a passage from the article and respond to it. But you could talk about whether or not you were aware of anything like this. If you react with skepticism to this article, you could talk about that and why. If you've seen this happen actually in your life, people being treated differently because of their race, particularly in the justice system, you can write about that. You could write about using the literacy skill and it helped you better understand the article. Okay, those are all options of what you can do for your response. One page with the annotated article, due by Friday, Google Classroom, article into the basket on my desk. Okay, thanks guys.